Michael Fasusi, news broke yesterday evening that he had scheduled an unofficial visit to Texas for the Kentucky game on Saturday. And the following Saturday, he also scheduled a visit to be in College Station for the Texas versus Texas A&M game. Believe November 30th is the date. Um, so, two pretty big visits. He's obviously still committed to Oklahoma. This is the number one ranked offensive tackle prospect in the state of Texas. And I believe, I think he's more talented. I like him as a prospect more than I ever like Brandon Baker. And I mean, the rankings agree with me. So this would be the highest ranked offensive lineman Texas has landed in the Sarkisian era if they flip him, not named DJ Campbell or Kelvin Banks. Um, I don't think he's quite ready to be a plug and play day one guy like Kelvin Banks would, but the way Texas has recruited and set up the depth on the offensive line, he doesn't have to play year one. But if he did, I think he could hold up fairly well. But he's not. I think he's very similar caliber prospect as Kelvin Banks, but not quite day one ready as Kelvin Banks was. But still a lot to like. Super young kid. He's a senior in high school. He didn't turn 17 till July, and believe it or not, he is 3 months younger or 2 months younger than Diabella is, who is in the 2026 class. So something to think about. But as far as the recruitment goes, chose Oklahoma over Texas and Texas A&M in August. Texas finished in third place. They were behind A&M. They were behind Oklahoma. The big part of that, yes, everyone had pretty high NIL numbers. Of those three, Oklahoma had the lowest at the time when he committed. But he was cool enough for that number because, the biggest thing for him, early playing time and relationships. Oklahoma held the advantage in both those departments over both Texas and Texas A&M to the point where, Fasusi was never going to base his recruitment off of NIL. It's a part of the pie, like it is for every top prospect in America. But for Fasusi, it is not the primary point of focus like it can be for other five-star prospects. So, I say that to say, if the number that I heard Texas offered in the summer was incredibly high, I firmly believe Michael Fasusi is going to make seven figures as a true freshman next year, wherever he ends up. But, even if Texas throws an outrageous number at him this weekend, it still might not happen because, again, NIL is lower on the priorities list than a lot of people tend to think, especially for a five-star offensive tackle prospect that's the number one tackle in Texas. I still kind of feel the same way. Whereas, if Bill Bedenbaugh is retained on the Oklahoma staff, I think he will keep Fasusi. A source spoke with one of Colin Kennedy's sources. Told him, it's kind of just a second round of recruiting and wants to make sure he's making the final decision with Oklahoma. The way I'm kind of looking at it, I still think he is pretty firm with his decision to go to Oklahoma. It's just, I'm going to take these last few trips in case, or he's looking for someone to give him a reason not to go to Oklahoma, I feel like,
Yeah.
And right now, he's pretty happy with that decision, but he's going to go take these trips, have these conversations. Important thing to remember that is not brought up a ton by other people. His best friend is Sean Hutton. Who is Sean Hutton? Sean Hutton is a 2025 interior offensive line prospect from Louisville. He's Michael Fasusi's best friend. He's a really good high school player, but just due to measurables and length, all that, he's not a scholarship power four player. He just isn't. So he's committed to Oklahoma as a walk-on. He always wanted to go to Oklahoma. Sean Hutton's father attended Oklahoma. He's an OU alum. Did not play football there, but just an OU alum as a student. So Sean Hutton was always going to go to Oklahoma, walk on or Scully, and he committed to Oklahoma either late May, early June as a walk on, and then went with Fasusi on all of his trips to OU as well. They've taken a lot of trips together. They've been to Texas together before. They've been to A&M together. And Texas A&M also offered Sean Hutton preferred walk-on spots on the roster. But Oklahoma did it in like January, A&M did it in like March, and Texas waited till like May for whatever reason. So that's part of the equation too. I don't think, Michael Fasusi is making the decisions for his life, based off of his best friend's feelings. But that is part of the equation as to why Oklahoma is an attractive opportunity. They're supposed to room together as freshmen next year and be roommates and, so on and so on. So they have a lot of advantages in the relationship department. The entire staff has, put more effort in than any other staff has in terms of making them feel welcomed and recruiting the family as well. Oklahoma has every single relationship advantage there is.
Mm-hmm.
So bringing that up to say, like, Texas could blow out Kentucky this weekend. He could have a phenomenal visit. He could get a new NIL number from Texas, and he could still stick with Oklahoma. So, um, you know, what's the saying? Recruit through the whistle, especially for the top tier prospects, and this is a top tier prospect. If Michael Fasusi was to end up in the Texas class, he would be the best prospect in my eyes, not named Jonah Williams. So, and I mean, I think the rankings agree with me on that. But
He is enrolling in January, correct?
yes, he'll be an early enrollee. So, I mean, the signing period's December 4th through 6th, so he has until December 6th to finalize a decision. But something to think about. A&M did finish second. I think A&M.
Technically, Jordan, he technically he doesn't. I mean, if he wanted to, he could he could enroll, wherever he wants.
You are correct, but they're not, and no one's really thinking that at this point. I think I'd be pretty surprised, but I get what you're saying.
I've told you if I whatever this new document is that's replacing the national letter of intent, I wouldn't sign it. I wouldn't sign it if I've got leverage. Now, like I said, Michael Fasusi is one of the guys that has leverage. What do you think Oklahoma's going to tell him? No, like, no, we need you to sign this right now or you're not coming. No, he can do what he wants. But
yeah, and I've seen people be like, well, what about Oklahoma's rule where like your scholarship gets pulled if you visit another school? Yes, it's always been a rule, but when I brought it up, I've always said it doesn't matter for the top tier guys. Like, you think Oklahoma's going to call Fasusi and be like, hey, buddy, you show up in Austin this weekend, your scholarship is no longer. Yeah. Like, Texas can do that. Like, Texas literally did that with Samaje Burrell when he was looking at Baylor late in the process. Like, Jeff Choate literally told him, if you show up in Waco, we are pulling your offer. And Samaje Burrell is who told me that. So, you can do that with certain guys. But if Texas ever tried to do that with Kelvin Banks late in the process, it wouldn't happen. They would never try that. Certain guys just have more leverage than others. And Fasusi he can do whatever he wants as long as he's committed to OU. They can't do anything about it. So I think as long as he shows up this weekend, Texas could have a chance. I do think, if they were to flip him, a visit is required because some conversations need to be had. And, to ease up the relationship front, give Texas a better shot because, I keep saying how Oklahoma holds the advantage over them. So does A&M. I do think A&M has a better shot of flipping Fasusi from Oklahoma than Texas currently does. And that's just based off the feedback we've gotten from sources. And, I mean, another thing, everyone wants to talk about Texas and NIL, like, oh, they can just put a big number and flip them late. A&M can pay him just as much as Texas can if that's what it comes down to. Yeah. Now, Oklahoma can't really compete with those two schools if it really turns into a bidding war. But Texas and Texas A&M could infinitely compete in NIL. That's just how those schools are set up. So,
yeah, I think I'm with you. I think I see these as CYA visits. Basically, if stuff gets blown up at Oklahoma to the point where it no longer appeals to him to go there, then clearly his next two options are either Texas or Texas A&M, and he's only got one opportunity to visit each of those schools because A&M's at Auburn this weekend. They're not home. So he goes to Texas this weekend, goes to College Station the following weekend, Thanksgiving weekend, and then he just has to wait and see what happens with OU. And then if Bedenbaugh's fired or whatever happens, and it's sudden, like you said, it's suddenly not an attractive option for him anymore, then he can look at, all right, is it Texas or A&M? I just visited both. Let's weigh some pros and cons and pick a school.
Yeah, and for Texas and the relationship department, Chris Gilbert has helped that a little bit. He's kind of come on late in this recruitment. He is kind of Texas's closer and secret weapon for different types of recruitments. And, Louisville is a Northwest Dallas area program. And, Chris Gilbert has pull all over the state, but he's more pull in South Dallas and the I-20 corridor than anywhere else. So, I don't know if it's quite a slam dunk that Chris Gilbert's on it, but he's definitely helping. And, it's better that he's helping than he's not. So, yeah. But the thing is, Michael Fasusi knows that if he goes to Texas, Chris Gilbert isn't his offensive line coach. It's Kyle Flood. Mm-hmm. So the relationship there, I think, needs to improve for Texas to actually have a legitimate shot. And I mean, yeah, like I said, I feel like Texas is behind A&M in terms of who's most likely to flip him. But I mean, if he ends up at a school that isn't UT, A&M, or Oklahoma, I think me and everyone else would be extremely surprised. You know, you don't ever want to discount a school like Oregon trying to get in late, but he's going to end up at one of those three schools,
Yeah.
almost positive. So,
hey, what is Lamont Rogers waiting on, or is there still? Is he
so that's
100% sure that he's going to A&M? Because I figured
I'm
that deal would have been done by now.
yeah, I'm happy you brought that up. I was actually told week 1 at the end of August, I was told it was I forget what game I was even at, but I was in the press box talking with some other folks, and everything I was told led me to believe he was ending up at A&M then. And it was pretty much a done deal, but I was told then it might take all the way until December 4th. So, you know, that's something to think about. Like, I think Lamont Rogers is either going to stick with Mizzou or end up at A&M. I lean towards A&M. I still think they're eventually going to get him. I don't, know the exact holdup, but I think he's going to end up at Texas A&M. A&M has to balance that because both Fasusi and Lamont know A&M wants the other one too. This is what Texas had to dance with, back in the spring. And it caused for some, kind of awkward times with Lamont Rogers and his camp.
Yeah.
Because it's like, are you really telling me I'm the number one offensive tackle on your board when Michael Fasusi's visiting 4 times in the spring?
Yeah.
Kids aren't stupid. And, I'm not calling the Texas staff stupid. This happens to every other college staff in the country, right? But with Lamont, Lamont and Michael Fasusi are close friends. Or I wouldn't say close friends, but they talk. They FaceTime, they play Xbox together sometimes, they talk. And I'll say that for later. But with Lamont and Fasusi, there is a chance that they don't handle that the right way, and they don't end up with either of them like Texas got stuck with back in the summer. Those are tough situations for schools to manage because you have to keep both guys happy and keep both guys convinced of stuff. So that's kind of it. That's all I got for Fasusi.
I'll give you. Can I give you an example of that just to relate it to to Texas, just to give everybody an example of what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
In the go back to the 2020 cycle, that summer of 2019, when Texas is recruiting running backs, and they really like Zach Evans and they really like Bijan Robinson, but it got to a point where, like you said, I think they felt like, all right, if we keep recruiting both of them, there's a better chance we don't get either of them. So basically, Stan Drayton and Tim Beck was involved in that recruitment. They basically had to choose. It's like, all right, which one are we going after? And you can say for better or worse, whatever. Stan Drayton decided, all right, Bijan's my guy. I've got the better relationship with him. I think he's a good kid. Not to say that Zach Evans wasn't, or that they talk trash about Zach Evans, but they just felt like, all right, if we want Bijan, we got to stop recruiting Zach Evans. And that's pretty, other than a little snafu that happened where Zach Evans was supposedly going to make a visit that Stan Drayton had no idea he was coming to campus for. Ended up working out for the Beavos on that deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's really interesting whenever schools end up in situations like that. Like, I think I've talked about this, but Austin Novosad and Baylor was in a similar deal. So Baylor had this kid named Zach Pyron, who's now at Georgia Tech. He's from Pinson, Alabama, and he was in the 2022 class. And the kid committed to Baylor in early spring of his junior year. Had a pretty good offseason camp circuit that spring heading into his senior year. Ended up backing out because he was backing out to kind of open his recruitment up to get more offers. And then he never really got more offers. So come middle of his senior year, he's trying to commit back to Baylor, and they're telling him, like, hey, no, like, you got to wait. We might take you, but we don't know. And it's because they had offered Novosad that summer, who was in the class below in 2023, and they loved him. They were his first offer. They loved him. I think Baylor messed up a lot of that Novosad situation themselves if they would have just kind of done the things that they asked for or that I was telling them y'all need to do. But early on, they made a great eval and offered him, and they loved him in the class below. So as the time went on, they were recruiting him super hard. And Pyron is trying to commit the entire fall to Baylor. And the week before signing day, Nova said, they asked him, like, hey, would you be open? He's like, I don't know. And then they make the promise, like, hey, if you commit to us, we will not take this class of 2022 kid. That's how much we like you. And, we will gamble and put all of our chips on you. He's like, okay. Waits until signing day. Pyron ends up at Georgia Tech. That's the only school that would take him that I think he was cool with going to. And then the day after signing day, December 16th, Novosad committed to Baylor. Stays committed all the way up until signing day the following year. And at 6 a.m. on early signing day it would have been December of 2022, he flips to Oregon, and Baylor went 2 years without a quarterback because, they let Pyron walk because they loved Novosad so much. And then Novosad ended up walking, left him at the altar, and they ended up 2 cycles without a QB. So always interesting situations where you got to pick a guy and really invest in him. And, if those guys leave, then you are shit up creek without a paddle. That's why Baylor's had so many struggles. They can't get QB right because they've had the portal for it. But, shout out to Randa. He's keeping his job. So
yeah, the Fighting Aranda. Yeah, I remember a time where Texas went 2 cycles about 20 years ago. They went back-to-back cycles without taking a quarterback, but it wasn't for lack of trying. Everybody just knew Texas had Vince Young. It was like, yeah, I don't want to go sit behind BY for 3 years. So
yeah,